Hello, and welcome to the introductory video for a new tool being launched by the Cornell University School of Industrial Labor Relations, our New York State School District COVID-19 Tracker. This new resource is an interactive web-based mapping application that brings together multiple sources of data on COVID-19, demographics, and related topics by school district in New York State. With all of the urgent competing challenges that parents, employees, and public decision makers are facing each day of this pandemic, the value of open and easily accessible information has never been higher. The New York State School District COVID-19 Tracker is an attempt to alleviate some of the burden on users who are searching for this information by centralizing relevant data into one location. The remainder of this video provides a short demonstration of the resource. For more detailed technical information on the tool, continue to check this YouTube channel for new videos and content. For now, let's take a look at the application. Accessing the application can be done via a direct URL that uses an extension off of our main School of Industrial Labor Relations website. Adding /NYS-school-district-COVID-19 tracker to the end of our URL will take us directly to the application. Since that is a tricky URL, we have it linked here in the bottom of the video, and it might be helpful just to bookmark it since it's a lot to remember. Accessing the application brings us first to a disclaimer that offers some basic instructions on zooming in and out, on what the different parts of the tool are, and a disclaimer on the data sources, where we've brought in a lot of this information from, as well as some warnings just to keep in mind as we use it. One of the pieces of information that has been created by our team is a breakdown of estimated active and cumulative COVID-19 cases within school district boundaries. So this is not specific to the school district itself, and the cases are not related to the district's activity. Rather, they provide some community or geographic context for what's going on in the district by looking at cases across the residential population of that district. In order to get to those estimates, we rely on county level data and some statistical analysis. And so for that reason, we do build these as estimates and not exact case counts by district. Rather, again, the goal is just to provide some finer resolution, more detailed information on where active and cumulative cases have been showing up across the state. So you're greeted with this disclaimer as soon as you walk into the video. If you don't want to see that every time, you can go ahead and check the box to not show this screen again and then click OK. Although, again, to keep in mind some of the caveats and limitations with the data, as well as where we're sourcing a lot of the information from, it might be useful to take a screenshot or copy and paste the text so that you have that in mind as you're working with it. Once we click OK, the basic layout of the tool is fairly straightforward. For those users who may wish to see the tool in full screen, at the bottom right-hand side of the tool layout or the tool interface, there's a button to enable full screen mode, and that brings us into a full screen application where we have a banner on the top. On the left, we have a couple of monitors that I'll describe in just a moment, as well as a legend for the map. In the center is the main map interface, and on the right, we have layers that users can toggle on and off. The two layers that are automatically visualized as soon as a user enters the tools are an outline layer that shows districts where estimated active cases have increased week over week. So since 7 days ago, 7 days from the date that's represented on the two monitors on the left-hand side. And the other data layer that's visualized is created by a third party, MCH Strategic Data, which has gone through for the entire United States and tried to describe what they found out about what school districts are doing, whether they're reopen online, on premises, hybrid, or whether they weren't able to discover the information when they created this data layer. So those are two layers that are visualized just for an overview. The monitors that we can see on the left-hand side bring in case data from the New York State Department of Health. The New York State Department of Health on a daily basis releases information on new cases that were recorded for that day. There's typically a 24 to 48 hour lag on publishing that data as the DOH brings all of the information together. And so at any given time when you access this tool, you might see up to about a 48-hour delay on the number of cases or on the date that we're looking at for the cases. And so as of October 26th, which is around the time of this recording, there were around 22,000 active cases, which are defined as those new cases that have been announced within the past 14 days, and nearly 500,000 cumulative cases across the state. Now, coming over to the layers list, you will notice that there are check boxes. The 2 layers that I've already mentioned have their boxes checked, indicating that they are toggled on. The remaining layers have boxes that are toggled off. And so using this interface is fairly straightforward. So I'll give a quick demonstration of a single school district in just a moment. But for now, if we want to see some broad overview pictures, if we take away the MCH strategic district data layer for a moment by unchecking its box and toggling it off, we can see that widespread cases have increased week over week across New York State. That is consistent with some of the state level information that's coming in, where over the past month, there have been rising numbers of daily cases. And so we can see the geography of where those cases have been rising week over week just by looking at the yellow highlighted districts. Turning that turning that layer off for a moment, we can also get a big picture of where cases have been recorded since the start of the pandemic. So there's a layer called Cumulative COVID Case Rates by School District. Turning that on, we'll create a layer and populate a layer that shows cumulative cases per 1,000 residents of each school district since the beginning of the pandemic. The geography follows what is widely known, that downstate and the population centers, including over in Buffalo, Niagara, have seen more cases because they have more folks living in them. But because these rates are normalized, you can also identify some districts, normalized meaning that their rates per 1,000 residents, can also see some parts of upstate that have higher than average or higher than typical COVID-19 case rates across New York State. So that's the big picture of the cumulative cases. That lines up with, and these district level estimates are derived from, what Johns Hopkins University has been keeping track of since the start of the pandemic, county level case data. And so here, this data layer ports directly in from Johns Hopkins University. Each bubble represents one county, and clicking on a bubble will just show you the details for the number of confirmed cases and the number of confirmed fatalities from COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic. And Johns Hopkins has the capacity and ability to update this in relatively real time. So you'll see that this layer is always a bit ahead of what we get from the New York State Department of Health and when we're updating our New York State cases. So we can see that the geography of those county level case data really lines up with what we can see in the school district level estimates that we've created. And so the bottom line is that where absolute counts are high, where the bubbles are big, we also see some high relative instances or high rates of COVID-19 as well. Turning both of those off, we can also get a picture of where active cases are. So those cases that have been reported new cases within the past 14 days. Checking on the active COVID-19 cases per 1,000 persons layer shows us again, as a rate of 1,000 residents of a school district, so not of 1,000 students or 1,000 faculty, but of 1,000 folks who live within inside of the boundaries of a school district, the relative size of active cases across New York State. And this is consistent with a lot of what we're seeing in headlines with outbreaks in the southern tier of New York State. We can see that in downstate, it almost looks like there are few active cases, but again, because these are relative cases per 1,000 persons, the population density and population in downstate is so much higher that the rates are comparatively lower in a relative sense, but not in an absolute sense, meaning full counts of cases. So those are the big pictures. Now, what if we wanted to look at a specific district? If you know where that district is, you can use the zoom in and zoom out buttons in the top left, or if you have a scroller bar on your mouse, you can scroll in and out to zoom in and out on the tool. If you want to get to a district very quickly, there's a search box in the upper right that just enables a very quick search. And so if we're interested in the Holland, New York school district, we could type in Holland, New York up in this text box. One important thing to keep in mind with the search box is that we do have to add, as tedious as it may seem, the comma New York to any search that we're doing, because this search box does go over, the search goes geographically over the entire globe. And so if we're not specific, you may zoom into a location not in New York State where we would not have the data. So if we specify Holland, New York and press enter or click on Holland, New York, USA from the search box, we get zoomed in right to the district of interest. And we get zoomed in at a very fine, very close up level. And so it may be useful to you to zoom out a couple of times using the minus icon in the top left of the screen. But here we have the Holland, New York School District. Any layer that is activated inside of the layer list to the right, if we click on an individual district, we'll get all of the information that's embedded or included in this layer. And so because I currently have only one layer activated, I get just one pop-up box when I click on New York State. And what I get in that pop-up box is all of the data that's included in the active case layer, from the school district's name to the estimated active cases, to the population gleaned from the United States Census American Community Survey, the most recent one that's available, to the population density, and then the rates of cases, both in an active and cumulative sense. We also provide calculations. Now there's some rounding that goes on here. So we provide estimates that include decimal places, just because going from county level data down to district level data does involve using some fractions. And so we don't lose any cases. We allow the decimals to remain here. But the way that we read this is that active cases per 1,000 in this Holland district are, between 0 and 1 cases per 1,000 residents. Cumulative cases are about, between 4 and 5 cumulative cases per 1,000 residents. The total number of cases that we've seen since the start of the pandemic is about 31. The number of active cases is maybe 0 or 1. And again, this is a result of the estimation procedure. A week ago, there was between 1 and 2. And so because of the rounding issues that do take place sort of behind the scenes, we see a relatively flat change. We haven't seen much week over week change or month over month change in this district, so it's been relatively stable. If we want to know what's been going on in this district since it reopened, we could always re-enable this MCH strategic data district level reopening status and see that Holland has been operating in a hybrid capacity. And so it's good to see that estimated active cases have remained relatively flat there because there is some face-to-face in-person instruction going on. The remainder of the data that we see in this active case layer is pretty deep, and we've synthesized a lot of indicators from US Census data and other sources that may be relevant to school district planning during the pandemic. So we focus in on specific subpopulations of children living in limited English-speaking households, children living in households receiving social assistance, children of color attending public schools inside of each district. And so this is the layer, this active case layer, that gives you all of that information in one fell swoop. Now, because that is a lot of information to synthesize at once, we have broken out selected indicators just to be visualized one by one so that you don't need to consume all of this information at once. I'll get to that in just a moment. The other thing that I'll point out here is that inside of this data layer, we also have metrics on school population, enrollments, full-time teachers, and school district expenditures per pupil. Those come from New York State and federal data sets. In particular, the school population and enrollment and full-time teachers variable comes from the US government's Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data set, which gives us every public school. So if we toggle on the public school list inside of New York State. And so if we enable that layer of New York State public schools and click on an individual school in the district, we can see facts about that district. Some of the facts that are included here are enrollments and full-time teachers, and adding all of that together for all of the public schools in a district gives us what the Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data defines as the school population for a given district. So that's where that information comes from. While we're here and looking at a specific school in a specific district, the information that we have for every public school in the state when this layer is toggled on include basic contact information, a description of what type of school it is, enrollments, starting and ending grades, and then 2 links for additional information. So just very quickly going to these links, one link is to the NCES report for a given school. And so that's from the National Center for Education Statistics, which just breaks down enrollment by grade, the characteristics, and gives some more detailed information on each school. And then the other link is directly to the school or the district's homepage. Now, because it is difficult for the 600 and some odd school districts across New York State to synthesize all of the information that's updated frequently on what schools and school districts are doing for COVID-19, by linking to each school's website, right on their homepage, typically most schools are providing their reopening guidelines and plans and any updates. And so it is an extra click, but users are able through this tool, through our COVID tracker, to get directly to a school's homepage and find out what's going on with COVID-19 and the school's planning today. All right, so closing that out, what I'll do is turn off this public schools layer. And as I said, it's possible to, if we don't want to consume all of these indicators all at once, if we're just interested in, say, how many children maybe in households receiving social assistance, if we want to plan, for, or actually, I'm going to change that up. I apologize for the hiccup. What if we want to plan for and understand how many children are in households headed by single parents? And so this is a population that's going to be extremely affected if schools do need to face questions of potentially temporarily or for the years shutting down. That would mean that parents who are presumably working or maybe working would have to face a difficult challenge of once again being at home and providing childcare. And so understanding the extent of that population is a good way to do some planning ahead to figure out the potential impacts of a shutdown. And so if we enable just that one layer and again click on the Holland district, you'll notice that something sort of strange happens, that all of a sudden on our pop-up box we have one of two. And I want to bring this up just so users keep this in mind, that anytime there are multiple layers highlighted on this layers list and we click on a specific district, the tool is going to try to read all of the information from every active layer. And so there is this little arrow that allows us to navigate between the two layers. In one case, we see the first layer that we click on, Holland Central School District. We get our information on the fraction of households with children headed by single parents. And then the other layer that we can look at is that same active case layer that we were already looking at before. If we uncheck that and toggle off that layer, now we're just looking at our single layer of children in households headed by single parents. And when we click on Holland School District again, we don't have that one of two issue up here. And so anytime you see that on the top bar of these pop-up boxes, just recognize that you probably have multiple layers activated. And so it may be useful for you to go back and figure out exactly what it is that you're looking for from this application. But in this case, looking at the fraction or percentage of children in households headed by single parents. This is broken down into categories or bins that are called deciles. And so the way that those work is basically it splits all districts across the state into 10 categories. So the bottom 10%, the 10 to 20%, all the way up to the top 10% in terms of the specific metric. And so in this case, with Holland looking at households headed by single parents, the fraction of children in such households is about 20%. And so in that case, that puts Holland in this particular metric in about the bottom 30% of New York State. If we wanted to look at a different metric and think about, say, children with disabilities, in this case, looking at the Holland district, about 10% of children inside of this geography, the Holland School District, have disabilities according to the US Census American Community Survey. And so in this case, this puts Holland in the upper 10% of all of New York State in that metric. And so this is a subpopulation that would require very specific and careful attention if a school district is planning for potentially another shutdown. How would students with disabilities be accommodated in such a situation? Because such students do constitute a large fraction, relatively speaking, of children inside of the school district. And so again, the tool's purpose is just to bring a lot of this information together in one location to ask questions like these and to be able to have answers ready in case those questions require some sort of action, whether that's making a decision again on a temporary or a longer term shutdown for the school year. And so all of these other metrics from the US Census Bureau, child poverty, children living in limited English speaking households, by activating those layers and clicking on the district in which you're interested, you get the specific information for that district on that metric. It's only with this active case layer, one of the feature layers here, where all of the information is included inside of the layer. And so you get this lengthy pop-up with everything that we've collected, all of the data that we've collected for that specific district. The only other layers that are down here, and these will be featured more in forthcoming videos that talk about technical information, are census tract level indices that we use to help us in some of the statistical analysis to disaggregate cases from the county level down to the school district level. The census tract level indices that matter a lot to our analysis are indices that look at social vulnerability, a CDC index, a Centers for Disease Control Index that looks at the degree to which an area's population is especially vulnerable to something like a virus or a pandemic. And then we also look at indices from the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, on respiratory health hazards and air quality, recognizing that populations living in areas with higher respiratory health hazards or poorer air quality might be more susceptible to something like COVID-19 because poorer air quality and more respiratory health hazards might contribute to cases of asthma or other pre-existing conditions that make populations more vulnerable. So using these indices from US government sources in our statistical models helps us get from county level cases down to the school district level. And that's our tutorial for today. Continue to check back. We'll add new videos as we're able to that feature more tools and technical information from this resource, the Cornell University ILR Schools New York State School District COVID-19 Tracker. Thank you.